All right, guys, this is a different style podcast than what we've ever done.
Yep.
Because we've got a turkey sitting right here. But we always end up doing this post-hunt. You know, we'll sit there and we'll talk for forever. A lot of times in the past, we'd film it and put it in the end of the video. But sometimes you just get frustrated because you cut a bunch of it out. And you're like, oh, we're just going to condense it. So we're just going to do like a full-on hunt breakdown. And hopefully tell you guys the full story of this and some of the things that we feel like we did right and some of the things that I guess maybe we've learned in the past that led us to this situation.
Hopefully if you're watching this and or listening, it didn't just hold up.
It didn't. That should work.
Hopefully if you're watching this and or listening to it, you have previously just listened to or watched the podcast we did yesterday when we were driving down here about shaking the funk of that first day funk of turkey hunting. And I feel like because we had that conversation last night, that helped us, like just for me and you, just helped us.
Being on the same page.
Yeah, to like kind of get some of that stuff out and discuss things that we usually mess up on those first hunts of the year. And we kind of just talked through it and turned around and we put it into practice. We even stopped as we were pursuing this turkey and we were like, this is just what we talked about last night. We're not doing these things we said that we sometimes do. And it turned out we got him for it.
Yeah. So I think we start by going back to last night. So we were leaving everybody in Mississippi, trying to get like a little head start. And we had some ideas, picked out some public areas, some campsites, stuff like that. And long story short, that all just completely fell through. We got here later than what we thought, so we didn't get a chance to roost anything. Didn't even get a chance to see the area in daylight, an area that we've never even been to. And then we got to the campsite that we planned on camping at and realized that we weren't going to be able to get what we needed to legally camp there at that time. So we find ourselves sitting in the truck looking at our phones and start going down the, option list, and I came across this link that took me to this place where it was like essentially somebody's property where they have little campsites on it that they charge cheap. But you're like looking on there and it's like, oh, this is probably a pretty good option. $13 or something for the campsite. So we ended up calling them, telling them what our situation was, and we got there and they were super cool. Well, we only really talked to Jay in real life, but I talked to his wife on the phone and got there, and he was just like real cool, real laid back, real talkative guy, and we were just having a good time hanging out with him and listening to him. And he asked what we were doing, and we said, we're actually here turkey hunting. And he's like, oh. He's like, well, there's a lot of turkeys right in this area. And to be honest, I didn't even pay any attention that there was any public land even close.
No, I didn't either.
I was just happy that we were finding a place where we could actually
That's all I cared about. I was like, I just want to kind of lay down and go to bed and worry about it tomorrow.
So he's like, oh, there's a lot of turkeys around here. And he said, right down this road, the other day I was driving and I had 9 hens in front of me. And a little bit later I asked him, I was like, how long ago was that? And he was like, oh, that's been a couple of years ago.
The other day.
So it's like, well, at least they have been here before. So we end up waking up this morning, not necessarily on time.
No, we were late.
Whatever, I don't mind that. Felt better for it.
I mean, I think my first alarm went off at 4:30, and then I immediately turned it off and set another one for 5:30.
That's always one of those deals too, where it's like, well, if the other guy really wants to get up, he'll just get me up.
Yeah, exactly.
And punched in where we were originally planning to hunt on the map, and it was like, it's going to be a long drive, and we're definitely going to get there after daylight. Nick said, they're going to be on the ground when we get there. And I was like, well, why don't we just go to this piece that is real close, which we had kind of been hemming and hawing about it anyway before that, but we had, made sure that we, had everything that we needed to hunt this particular area, whatever. Knew that was in the list of options, and we drove over, hit the very first pull off. I dropped Nick off, And I no sooner than got halfway, down that road, and Nick heard a gobble. So I feel like up to that point, everything had been going wrong, but we were having a good time, and we had
spirits were not down at all.
I think which is probably one of the most important things in turkey hunting specifically. I mean, it's important in all forms of hunting because you never know when your next opportunity is going to come, but like if you start getting real frustrated in turkey hunting, it becomes not fun really fast.
Yeah.
And I just feel like we did a really good job last night. Once we found the campsite, knew we were going to be able to get a good night's sleep, it was just like, hey, this is actually really fun and really working out. And I think that definitely helped our odds today.
Yeah. I mean, when you said, do you want to get out right here? I was like, yeah, I'll get out. And then there's like a little berm right there. And I was walking to that berm because I was about to sit down on it with my coffee and sit there and drink it and just listen for a while. Because I was not expecting to hear, like I was expecting to sit there for 5 minutes or so and then have to walk several hundred yards and stop again and listen. And I didn't even get to sit down, and this turkey gobbled, and we're like, okay. And we're back.
And we're going. And it's funny, too, because there was this part of me that was like, okay, that's good, but should we try to, like, that rarely happens, should we try to find more? Which is something that we talk about a lot, like, just start pinning turkeys, but it's like, well, season's open. You never know. He might, he might not be there tomorrow. So we just went for him.
Yep.
And I think the part that was really cool is the whole time we moved in, we just kept getting to a spot, we'd stop and listen, and we were just split up enough that we weren't necessarily standing beside each other till the very end, but we kept working our way in. We'd stop with a little bit of cover, listen, watch down through this burn, and he would gobble periodically. And as the morning progressed, like as we got probably towards 7, he started kind of tapering off that kind of last hour.
Yeah.
But, I mean, really, the biggest thing that I don't like about hunting this flat country is their ability to see. But if you look behind us, there's kind of a haze of brush through all this stuff. And our thought was, as we would crouch down, there's probably a dang good chance they're not going to be able to see us more than, I think at one point I said 70.
Yeah, you're like 70 yards, would be good. And, we don't want to get much closer than 70 anyways before we sit down on one, so.
Especially when it's
wide open.
Yeah, this open. It's a weird open because it is, but it isn't. And it's really open when you stand up, but down here it's much thicker. But down in there too, there's a creek bottom, and we were always kind of basing, his gobble and location to obviously where we were, but where it was in relation to that creek bottom. And we could tell on the map, even having never been here, that the topo lines got pretty tight right there, telling us that it dropped off down to that bottom. And you could also see on the satellite image like a band of different cover. And he was like right on that, which when we talk about all the time, water, it's a good place to start. And that's why I was like, you just want to get out here this morning. It's like, okay, that's part 1, water. So it's like, let's not overthink it. Who knows? We can hit this spot and keep going.
Yeah.
Well, lo and behold, there's one here.
Something else, about the water, and I didn't think about it until you dropped me off and he gobbled. And I looked at the map, and I knew the creek was there, but then I looked past it because the private's just on the other side, and there's some really nice private fields, big fields that way. And if you keep going that way, follow the creek bottom, goes into private that's got more big timber, and then like a big natural field, not like a cutout, ag field or anything, but it's just like a big
meadow
kind of. And I thought about it. I was like, well, he might just fly down to the bottom and they might go to that. And that was a worry of mine, but that was also something good. He's got that private there where they got this creek here on the public, and then they can ease right over the private real easily and be safe.
Yeah.
So
I agree with that. I think that was something that was also a concern too, from the standpoint of when we came in from the obvious public access, which is something that, I mean, in one of the videos that we just posted, Jake and Ted were talking about how as the season progresses, you want to kind of get between them and where people are accessing. And in this case, you could have got between them and the private boundary. And I remember thinking that on the way in, like, should we be doing that? But also didn't want to overthink it either. So, and another thing that was pretty cool is on the way in, we didn't see any boot tracks. I think this piece is honestly probably just small enough that not that many people, because it isn't, I mean, truthfully, it's a pretty tiny little block. There's a lot of public around, but this particular spot is like pretty small. And I think it would be easy to just overlook something like
and
this.
I think that's what has happened, especially this early on in the season. It got overlooked. I mean, because you can hear him from the road.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I mean,
yeah, like very easily hear him from the road.
Yeah, until it starts greening up down in there, you know, you hear him from the road every day for several weeks.
And the season's only been, this is the second day of season. Yesterday, we were, not here. But I think the thing that, you know, again, when I talk about the thing that I struggle with sometimes in the flat ground is just knowing when to pump the brakes. So I think what was cool is, as we were moving in, we kept, you know, confirming with each other like what we were thinking. And at one point, I had to just ask you a question that I feel like I have to ask people in like the last couple of years is, are you good? Like, are you content with this? Because if you're wanting to make a move, I'll make a move. But I think it's mostly because I'm starting to be like, well, I want to make a move, but I also want to play it patient. So like, I really want to know what, you know, whoever I'm with thinks too. And that really helped. That helped me a lot, because once I knew we were on the same page, it's like, okay, that whole like second half of this was real smooth.
And I think it was right after we had that little dialogue, we sat up there for a little bit, maybe like 5 or 10 minutes, and then he gobbled, and it was like clear, distinct, and we could tell, you know, he's on the ground, not that far, but we got room. And you turned around and looked at me, and you were like, we can go. And I was like, yeah, let's go now. Now that he's told us where he is, let's do another 50 to 75 yards, and then repeat the process.
And one thing that we were doing the whole way in is we were trying to take any of these bigger patches of understory brush or big trees and put them between us and right where he gobbled. We did that the whole way down, and what we would do is we'd stop, we'd kind of look ahead, glass ahead, pick a spot, talk about, like, is that where we should head to next? And pretty much every time it was like, yep, that's what I was thinking. So we'd do that, go right to that spot, and then stage up again. And we never called to him until we actually made our last stand in our setup. And I think that was something, too, that was cool. Like, in the past, I've been hesitant to use locator calls. I think hunting like a few places when I was growing up that were really, really heavily pressured kind of turned me off of that. You just hear so many times people hitting those calls and turkeys shutting up that I kind of got shy to it, and unnecessarily shy to it. And I've learned in recent years that, you know, it's something I should probably be more confident in, and I've incorporated it a little bit more. But I've just recently took the Woodhaven owl call, and I found it in my box of calls, and I had kind of given up on it a few years ago, but I practiced it the whole way down here. Super long drive, and I did it, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of times. And I felt confident enough to use it. And I didn't sound great doing it today, but I did do it, and he gobbled one time.
You did it the first time you did it, he answered, which is good because we needed to know where he was. Second time you did it, he didn't answer, so we're like, ah. And then I think that was one of the times where we just waited a while, and he eventually gobbled on his own.
Yep.
And we're like, okay, now we can move again. But it's like, yeah, you got him once. Second time you didn't get him, but I mean, it's just, they're weird. I mean, you can't. And it was also getting to a point where I wasn't sure if maybe had we bumped him. It was like, did we bump him? Because that one hen early on when she started, she was like assembly yelping, like yap, 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 like 15 notes. And then after that, he had shut up, and then we didn't hear anything for a little bit. And that's when we'd really broken into this barrier. We're like, and that's, I think we were in the transition. You're like, do you want to go little pines or bigger pines? So let's go bigger pines.
That was just, I can see that log. That was our, I guess, kind of second to last stop.
Yeah, that right up there. And is in that barrier. I'm like, I don't know. And I think that's when he tried to owl the second time was in there, and he didn't gobble. I'm like, I think that's also, I'd said to you, said, well, we can do a couple things. Let's go, we can go here, sit 10, 15 minutes, listen, see if they pipe up and let us know where they're at. Or we know that they were in here, we can back out, go down the road, it's still early, go see if we can hear some other turkeys and just keep moving. And you were like, I want to hunt this for a little bit, which that's what I wanted you to say. But I also know, you don't know, sometimes people don't want to sit still,
right.
you know? So I'm glad we did that. But.
Yeah, I felt like we were in that bubble at that point, that if he was still there and we hadn't bumped him, that we had a dang good chance of him just even floating past us, or giving us another gobble or hen yelp or something. That way we could make that other move. You know, the whole time, I think the thing that was on my mind is like, I'm looking for places where we can get at the base of a tree and have enough cover, but there were really rarely places where we had that. And we knew there was going to be a lot of eyes. I guess that was what I was going to say. I was going to say, as we were moving in too, he stopped gobbling when that other hen started assembly yelping. And we could tell that he had at least a hen, but we turned to each other one time and we were discussing, and I said, you know, he seems like he's got hens now. I mean, he definitely has a hen around him now. But he's still gobbling enough that, like, he might just be being a fool right now. And when we talked about that, we both kind of were like, it does kind of seem like that. And we made that last move. Got into the spot where, again, looking for places at the base of the tree where there's cover. But the only thing that we could really do was bury ourselves in some of this haze. And that was like our best option. But we have a bunch of video clips of it. There's kind of a transition right that we're sitting on, right about where the cameras are. On that side of the transition, there's big pines. And on this side, you can see there's a bunch of small pines. But right where that transition is, there's a break in that understory brush. And because of that, that's where we wanted to set up. That's really where we wanted to target from our, I guess, second to last stop. We made it another, probably 50 yards, 60 yards up here. Saw that transition, kind of hung out on it for a second, and then decided to make a setup. And we had to bury ourselves back in that stuff. And I really didn't have many shooting lanes, but one of the things about being in thick areas, especially as the shooter, when you're burying yourself, you kind of feel limited with your movements and your shot opportunities. But if you have got enough to hide, when it's thick like this and there's a bunch of stuff, they have to come in pretty close. And the most important thing, though, is I crawled out and I just pushed away some of these I guess, little saplings, and I would just like push them and get them hooked up just like that, where I'd get them kind of hooked up on another branch and just created this little lane down through there. And I even got up a second time and moved stuff. And that's ultimately right where the turkey ended up.
And if you wouldn't have done that, we wouldn't have even shot. You wouldn't have gotten a shot because it would have been too thick really right there.
Close,
we just would have looked at them, watched them go past us.
So then once we set up, the calling was pretty straightforward. I think I just yelped at him and he responded. Yelped again, and he didn't respond that second time, but when he responded, it was like, okay, we're like right in this bubble. Like there's a dang good chance this is gonna work out. Then the thing that you said that I think really sealed the deal was when he responded and I called the second time and he didn't respond, a couple seconds or a couple minutes went by and the hen responded with just a simple like, yo, 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 yo. And you're like, I respond to her. And for whatever reason, I just didn't even, I wasn't thinking, I was just kind of focused on something else. And I was like, oh, it's a really good point. And I responded to her, and then it was just like.
I mean, seconds, because she yelped back at you again. And then we could tell in those two different yelps she had that they had already closed the distance. And then in like another 10 seconds, and she yelps again. And it was like at that time, then I saw him coming through the understory. And then it was, I mean, it was off to the races after that. Then the whole thing didn't last another 30 seconds, 60 seconds maybe.
But they came in and the hens got to the point where they could see right where we had called from. And they did that classic, like, pump the brakes, look. And I remember one of them looking hard and then turning away pretty quick and being like, he might not cross into that lane. But then this whole time, as like she started yelping, we could hear him spitting. And it started pretty faint, but I was like, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And then one time we both were like, spit. And he just kept pushing those hens, and instead of them like actually turning and running, they pretty much just relaxed. And probably because he was relaxed, is my guess.
Yeah, and he was steady pushing up.
Yeah.
So then there's like, oh, we'll hang out here. Because I thought that one was going to run back down in there, and he was just going to follow him back down there. And then what do you do?
Yeah,
You know?
I thought for sure that we weren't even going to see him because, that hen turned quickly like she was going to dart, and that got pretty nerve-wracking, honestly. I think we both were just like, oh no, I don't think it's going to work. But then they stopped right in the shooting lane.
Yep.
And then that also kind of freaked me out because I'm like, well, even if he steps in the lane, I'm not going to have a shot because the hens are going to be behind him. And as he kept coming up, they single file just went through, and that's when we realized too, oh, there's not just 3 of them, there's like
a bunch.
A lot.
Yeah.
And he just pushed them all up and out of there, and he got in the shooting lane. And we're kind of talking about it. I'm like, do you think I can pull that off? And Nick's like, I think if you can get his head to stick up. And I called, and he gobbled, and he stuck his head out, and he just kind of did that half look and pulled the trigger, and it worked out.
It worked out perfect.
Yeah. I mean, it's been since like, I think it was April 9th, 2022 since I shot a turkey.
Man, that's still early in the season too.
Yeah. 2022 was the season I just filmed a lot. Messed up some hunts in Mississippi and then shot that bird in North Carolina with Hayden. But then everything after that was just a lot of filming, which I enjoyed doing, but then I missed the whole season pretty much last year. Filmed my dad shoot one, which was still really cool.
Yeah.
But haven't been on the gun myself. I didn't really do that much last year at all. And it just felt good to be back in the game and just really work together as a team. That was really memorable for me.
I know if I would have been me by myself in here this morning on a piece of property I've never been on, no knowledge, I would have psyched myself out probably coming in. And maybe I get in here and I still make a good call and get an opportunity, but you don't have that person to bounce ideas off of, that's a huge help when you can do that. When you can sit there and we can talk about it and, okay, you feel good about it, okay, I also now feel better about it. When you're going at it by yourself, especially in a new area, it's easy to be like, my tendency would have been I would have stayed back too far. And I might have called from back there and he might have answered once or twice and then they just would have stayed down there and I never would have got in the bubble.
Yeah.
I've done that a lot by myself, so I feel like that's like my tendency when I'm being reluctant and not super confident is to just stay back. And that's not a horrible thing, you're not running them over, but you keep yourself out. Where today we're able to bounce ideas off one another and keep each other calm, focused, and then slowly ease up into ultimately when we found what was going to be the best spot for us to get. And if we would have went to that we were looking at, when we were back there at the second to last spot, we looked at that clump, we were like, really like to get to that, and we were like, well, let's bend around and we'll go down there to it. If we would have got to that, we probably would have busted them.
Yeah, it would have been like right on the verge of being,
because that's where it starts dropping down, and I don't think we would have gotten in there. And then as we were making that bend around, you saw the transition. You're like, well, actually, there's this transition here. And that's when you said, little pines or big pines. And that's what ultimately made the decision right there.
Yep. And the reason that we went big pines, and I was feeling that way as well, but then Nick said it when I asked, I was leaning towards big pines, and he said big pines. I was like, okay, good. But the reason that at least I was thinking was just more cover for our backs. Like we could get more square to that tree, where some of these little ones, all the little ones back there, unless you get really lucky and they just come in at the perfect angle, there's a dang good chance they're going to see your shoulders sticking out.
And there's not as much understory over here, whereas over there it's got a lot more of that thick stuff around those bigger pines. And especially like if it's just him coming in by himself, it's a different thing. That's hard enough. You factor in another 7, 8, 10 turkeys on top of it. I mean, it's hard to beat one pair of eyes, and you do 10 pairs. It's really tough.
Yeah.
Especially in this kind of environment here.
I think it's just pretty awesome when you come into a new area and you just, work in with confidence. I agree. I think it would have been different if I'd have been by myself. I feel like it only really worked with that like teamwork, that bouncing ideas off each other, but it was the perfect balance of confident, really like thinking things through, but not overthinking it. And then really focusing on like our strategy as far as our setup and what edge we were going to bring him to make him come looking. Like it was just all those little boxes that we were talking about, you know, how we've messed those things up in the past early in the season. And like literally yesterday, messed up a hunt with our buddy Thrash and his son Luke because we didn't get enough good cover.
That's a real hen.
Yeah.
Might be out of that group of hens trying to find each other.
But yeah, I mean, just to have all that be executed after what we talked about yesterday just feels good, man. I think that we can probably just wrap it up. It was just a quick one. We wanted to talk about these things, and they're all things that, you know, again, we would.
Sounds like a real hen, but also kind of sounds like a.
I think it's a real hen.
You think so?
I think so. I would say that I'm pretty confident that I think it is. But yeah, we'll wrap it up because we probably want to slip out of here and not spook this hen. But pretty awesome experience, man. Great hunt. Great job filming. Like, yeah, couldn't ask for a better way to get the season started. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Oh, you weren't rolling.
What's that?
I said you weren't rolling.
No. Ready? Yeah. I'm gonna go make sure.